of North America. And for those of you who are my age, and there are one or two around, you realize that we have lost an awful lot of tracks here in North America over the past 17 years. Tom, you can stay if you wish. We'd love to have you. You can stay. We'll let you this time. Oh, no, that's not Tom. There's Tom there. So. You can stay. Yeah, come on. This is the panel discussion on where is motorsport going. We've invited Gordon Kirby to be the moderator. Gordon, as you know, is an author and the North American correspondent for Motorsport.
Correct.
Author of many books. And then the panel members, reading from the left, we have Forrest Gillick from Argonne National Laboratories. Next to him, Scott Elkin, CEO of IMIS and IMSA. Cheryl Archer, who is the CEO of Pankow Systems, Racing Systems, who is the representative of suppliers on this panel. On the far right, we have Rachel Carlstetter from Shell Global Solutions, Gilles Simon from PURE, formerly of the FIA, and Bob Wildberger. Bob used to be the CEO of SCCA Pro Racing. And with that, I'm going to let Gordon take over and run the show. Thank you, Gordon.
Thank you, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here, and this is a great event in general. And just seeing all the presentations that have gone on here in the past few days, it really demonstrates how vibrant and alive motorsport is in terms of attempting to embrace new technology, and it's very exciting to me personally, and I think to all of you guys obviously who are involved in this and are trying to push forward to it. The big challenge appears to be, how do we get the governing bodies of motor racing to embrace, adopt new technology to push the sport forward? I personally am a tremendous opponent of what I call the great plague of spec car racing, which I believe has done and is doing tremendous damage to the sport across the board. Spec cars are fine at the lower level, in Formula Ford, for example. And even Formula Ford in its heyday was much, much more than a spec car. There were a great wide variety of manufacturers involved. Again, competition drove it. What is motor racing all about? Competition. And from day one, 1896 to today, that's what the sport has been all about. And it's always been about what's the new thing, what's the new car, the new engine. That has been the excitement for almost 100 years of automobile racing. And in the past 10 or 15 years, it's begun, apparently for economic reasons, to be driven out of the sport. The belief is that racing has become too expensive, so we've got to introduce the spec car to reduce costs. And as we know, there's so many red herrings involved in that, it's not necessarily the case. But again, it's the competition aspect. This is what's always driven the sport, and it's always new things. Parnelli Jones, the great IndyCar driver, and much broader than that, and who went on, of course, to be a great team owner and a true man who did the whole broad range of things in racing. But over the past 10 years, whenever I see Parnelli, he says to me, "There's nothing for you guys to write about anymore, is it?" And this is Parnelli, who is a real man's race driver, who was about the personality, but he knows the essence of the sport was always the new thing. What is the latest thing? So, to me, this is what I want to throw out to the panel and to everyone. This is the key thing. How can we reintroduce all of these elements that all of you guys are involved in and that we've been discussing? How can we really make this work? The ALMS is the only place in America today where new technology is being embraced. And Scott's done his green racing presentation. We can all debate about the value of green racing back and forth. But nonetheless, I think it's something, whether the sport's going to embrace it totally or not, we have to deal with it. One of the big issues, I think, and a number of us have discussed it today and in the past, I was just talking about it with Gilles Simon, who of course was involved with the FIA in determining the new F1 engine rules, and a year and a half ago at the Canadian Grand Prix, I wrote a story for Motorsport about the upcoming new engine rules, and the primary issue that everybody raised to me was the sound and the noise. And I have to say, I agree with them entirely. When I come to a Formula One race and you hear the sound of those cars to the umpteen RPM, it defines Formula One. But when you go to any kind of major race, a NASCAR race is defined when the flag drops and those 43 cars unleash all the power and you feel the ground shake. Same thing in that NHRA drag racing, the ground shakes. So the noise, the oral aspect is so essential to the sport. If we took away the noise and if we had a whole pile of Audis and Peugeots running around and that was what the entire field was, and they were all having to manufacture some exhaust as they do, would that work? Would that be successful? Would the pure spectacle of the cars on the track without the sound work? So to me, that is a big issue. And again, as my good friend Dennis Simonitis was saying, us balding, gray-haired guys, this is what we want out of the sport. Maybe it's not what the young people want. And as we know, all elements of the sport are struggling to attract the young fan. That is what we're losing. How do we get that young fan back? That's a tremendous challenge for us. They're obviously very technically oriented in terms of their use of computers, smartphones, and so forth. They live in that world, but they seem to have very little attraction for automobile racing. So we've got an interesting web of problems in terms of how do we take all of this great technology and everything that you guys have been involved in, how do we apply it to the sport, how do we make it work, and really create a new future for the sport, if you will. Again, and not to try and make it too political, but the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, I think in most people's minds, it was built on the spirit of innovation. And we always had new cars and new engines and so forth. And I was actually stunned 3 or 4 years ago. I wrote a book about Rick Mears, and we debuted it. And I did an interview race day morning with a fellow named Scott Sander, who is the anchor of the CBS morning show here in Indianapolis. He's a newsman. He's not a hardcore race fan, but he is knowledgeable about the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. It's here in his town. He covers it every year. And I was intrigued. We did an interview about the book, and at the conclusion of this interview, he was very well informed. He'd read the book, and he was very understanding. And he concluded by saying, I just want to add one thing. He said, Gordon is a tremendous opponent of spec car racing. He said, and I have to agree with him completely. He said, if you go over to that museum over there, this is what the sport is all about. Again, what I've been saying, the new cars, the new engines. So here's a man, he's not a tech head, he's not a technoid. He's a very distant race fan and really an Indianapolis fan from living here in town. But his passion for the Indy 500 was clearly driven by what was new, what was innovative, and so forth. And I thought that was a key point. I have to add one other point. In the past 5 or 6 years, in covering racing across the USA, I have had, I won't say thousands, but I will say hundreds of fans have come up to me and said, I hate these spec cars, and I'm not coming anymore to this race, and so forth. And so many of them have said, I go to my local vintage and historic weekend now because I like the cars. There's a wide variety of cars. There's a different oral variety. There's different visual variety, and the cars just look great. Not one person has said to me, I love spec car racing. I'm definitely coming back and I'm bringing my family next year. So that's my overall perspective. Where to begin on this subject matter? Who would like to? Well, Scott, let's begin with you because you're trying to actually actively make green racing work. You've done your presentation. Again, I will say that the ALMS fans across the country that I bumped into, the ALMS is doing quite well and draws quite good crowds at the classic road courses, and the fans say this is what they love to see, is a wide variety of different cars. Again, they're not engineers, but it's just the visual appearance and so forth. So you are actively involved in trying to bring all of this stuff to life in a real sense. What are the biggest challenges, and how do we really begin to go about making it happen? And is this the right thing to do, first of all?
Well, I think it's absolutely the right thing to do, and a big part of what what we're dealing with, and as I've kind of said to you a couple of times in our past, I actually have a very unique perspective on this because I was a part of spec racing before I came to IMSA. And the part of spec racing that I was a part of went bankrupt and didn't exist anymore, which is Champ Car. And so I think all of the proponents behind spec racing at a high level, albeit the Champ Car example was quite different and quite unique in terms of the split of open wheel racing. I'm not sure that that's necessarily the right answer in terms of financial abilities of teams or manufacturers. The thing that makes the LMS unique primarily is the rulebook, and the rulebook allows for different drivetrains, different engines, different fuels, different things like that. That's a big part of it. What feeds that, and it's exactly the same thing that fed it back in the old days, I guess I can say, is manufacturer involvement.
Yes.
And the manufacturers are the ones who are participating in our series to prove their technology and to truly go back to the win on Sunday, sell on Monday type of approach that racing has always kind of started with. So if a rule book allows for the technology, it will come. But it also comes in phases, and it also comes in terms of how the economy works as well. Our GT field has never been stronger. It's massive. It's incredible. It's probably some of the best racing anywhere right now. But also to that extent, our prototype field is not as great as it used to be. And prototypes are very expensive cars to develop. You mentioned Audi and Peugeot. Those guys are the only guys in town right now. They're the only guys in the game, and they're battling against each other. But they are utilizing the battle to promote technology. Audi came to Race in America to tell everyone, hey, a diesel doesn't have to be a loud, clanking, smoky car. And it's been a huge part of their sales strategy in the process of telling everyone about the TDI product line. So, I think the big key is that the economy comes into play, and it really comes into play with what the manufacturers truly want to achieve. And to kind of add to it, when we think about the last 4 or 5 years, the best-selling car in America has been the F-150 pickup truck.
Exactly.
There's not a lot of technology there, and if the manufacturers are selling that as their best-selling car, I don't necessarily see why they would have to go to racing to prove their technology. They don't have to. People are buying what they're telling them to buy. So I think it's a structure and a change of how the manufacturers go about it, and with the new CAFE standards that are coming out for 2016 and 25 that require the manufacturers to have higher mile per gallon ratings on the cars. Everybody, it seems like 2 years ago nobody had a hybrid. Now everybody's got a hybrid. It's the technology's starting to come back, and the best way to do that, and hopefully we're proving it with some of the things we're doing, and hopefully everybody's understanding that it's all about the rule book, is that the technology will advance faster and become better via racing. That's why we race. That's why it's always been done that way. So, ideally, the situation that exists in terms of trying to get better fuel economy will make this movement come back faster.
Just to stick with you for one more point, Scott, and again, this comes back to the whole issue of governing the sport and the politics within the sport. As we know, in the past couple of months, the FIA have announced their World Endurance Championship, right, and it includes only the Sebring 12 hours, right, and not the Petit Le Mans, which everybody assumed that it certainly would. So here you are, you being the LMS being great supporters of the ACO Mans style racing, and some of us would say, well, you've been kicked in the cojones here. You've made this commitment to it, and suddenly they've shut you out. Is this a classic element of the politics of racing, creating these problems? What kind of a problem is this for the ALMS?
Well, I guess it's a problem that's been created because now there's an additional platform for manufacturers to participate in that is truly worldwide. Everyone is recognizing the growth possibilities in Asia, whether it be China or India or something else like that. Everybody knows that they feel like those are the growth possibilities. So this World Endurance Championship has kind of kicked us a little bit in terms of taking away some of that manufacturer involvement, because now the manufacturers can come and race on different continents where they want to promote and sell their product. It puts it in a little bit different situation, and part of it is because we're struggling a bit. Obviously the country's struggling. I remember when I worked for Toyota in 2004, and back then I believe the number of cars that were total what were sold in the United States that year was something like 17 million.
Right.
You know, the numbers are now down to around 11.
Right.
The economy's drastically changed, so I think the World Championship has hurt what we would call the regional championships, which are those in separate countries like America and the IMIS. It's affected us in a way that, you know, it's obviously taken away prototype content from our series. One day we show up 4 times a year, so it's difficult. It all goes back, and as much as we hate it, as much as we think about the battles, you know, a perfect example, and you and I have talked about it many times, the examples in kart back in the day where there were multiple manufacturers batting against each other. It was still about the manufacturers. It was what direction they wanted to go in to help sell cars, and it's no different today.
Forrest, if I may bring you in, obviously you're a champion of the IMIS. You've made that point, but you've also made your criticisms of green racing in general. What is your view of how we can begin to push the sport forward, how we can embrace the new technologies, and what are the right technologies for the sport to embrace?
That's an excellent question, and I think the comments were made in the last session. There was a lot of comments about the color of hair, and obviously the group was bimodal. There was gray hairs, I think, white caps, and non-white caps, I think, is basically what it came down to. And the comment was made that, you know, there seems to be a little bit of a divide between generations here, and I have a little bit different perspective on that. And I brought up the point in the last meeting. Who here has smartphones? I mean, raise your hand. Everybody has one, and you probably change it every couple of years, maybe. Right? I'm
6
guessing.
months the older you get.
I mean, and as an example here, I just thought of this right now. I mean, let me see if this will work and see who recognizes this. It keeps trying to upload. So let me see if this is going to work here. Make noise. No, it doesn't look like it's going to make noise. Angry Birds. Everybody has Angry Birds, right? Fling the chicken at the pigs or whatever. The generations today, the stuff that we're getting changes so quickly. You know, this iPhone 4 is then they have the new 4S, right? And then the iPad, and then next year they're going to have the next thing, and that's what's happening today. And we're competing against video game systems that are just the new video game, Gran Turismo 5 and everything. I mean, this stuff is insane. And so that's the market of getting the youth into this sport. That's our competition. Racing, there's nothing more exciting than racing. But in order to do that, when we step back and take a look at these organizations, a lot of them are very reluctant to change. I mean, we still have carburetors in race cars. What? I mean, I'm an old classic car guy, but really. And the technology that we integrate and we play with every day comes so fast and so quickly, and the young people pick it up and they love it and run with it. Racing's got to do the same thing. It has to stop being so reluctant to let the fuel injection guys come in, to let the people that want to try the V6 at oil, and just let them run. And the youth are going to be more attracted to that and linked to the product than the old way. It's just changing. That's from our perspective.
And again, when people complain about when you say this is the way we've got to be, people say, oh, we can't afford it. But it's the competition amongst these various suppliers and technologies that create the platform to pay for it in many ways. It's not.
Well, and I think we have to pick some fights. It's an excellent point. But for example, Rob Fisher and I from Circle Track Magazine, we're talking, and there's guys going out now and getting the old 5.7 liter pickup truck engines with these out of the junkyards with these fuel injection systems, hooking them up overnight, basically, and just having great success in the local tracks allow them to do that. And that's a more modern technology that works very well for that platform. And I believe in the big growth philosophy. There are going to be the F1 very boutique, specialized engines. There's space for that. But at the base of the pyramid isn't there. You don't have the local guys that can't come in, the kids that want to come out with the Ecotechs and the Boost and Ford, EcoBoost and the LA50 GM products and race on the weekend, things that they can afford. And the fuel engine, they have no problem hooking up laptops and working with calibrations, and let them try to eke out that edge against each other. That gives it to them. That makes it theirs. And you start on that base, then the whole pyramid is strong. But it just seems to me that through politics, you bring up and so forth, the base of that pyramid is a bit rough in a lot of regions.
If I could turn briefly to Gilles Simon, who, of course, as you know, is now the pure engine man with Craig Pollack, and spent many years with Ferrari as their engine man, and also spent a period of time with the FIA, where he was involved in structuring the new Formula One engine rules. So Gilles has quite an interesting and broad range of experience in a very practical sense in terms of how to adopt new technology, having been through this thing specifically with the new Formula One engine rules and so forth. Gilles, what is your overall perspective here on, and of course you're involved in Formula One, so it's not so much reintroducing. When I talk about it, I'm talking about it in application to American racing. But still, it's an essential part of the debate in motor racing around the world. What's the right way to go? What are the political considerations?
I don't know about politics. What I can say is that the physics is the same from both sides of the ocean, so I don't see a big difference. I think that when we think about the future of motorsport, I think we need to think about 4 categories of people. The fans, the people that are not interested in racing, because there are some, too many maybe for me, but there are. Then the manufacturers, auto manufacturers, and our industry, because at the end we are an industry, we are producing goods. I think the fans, you may race different kind of technology, different kind of formula. I have never seen anybody interested in racing that will support single-make formula. Because obviously motor racing is also about technology, about the difference you can make by tuning your engine, tuning your car, your aerodynamics and so on. And if you're not interested in that side of motorsport, then you can go running or you can do bicycle race or whatever. But if you do motor racing, it's that you want to also achieve something with the car, with the mean, not only with yourself. And this is, I'm sure, true for most of the drivers. And so, I think that the fans are interested in diversity. And they are interested in technology, but we need to show them more. It's true that in Formula One, there is a reasonably good level of technology, but you don't see it from outside. So we need to show it more to explain how we reach this. And I was very surprised about the shock of having a Formula One driver seeing a Formula One connecting rod. He was not imagining how fun it was. And he was a Formula One driver. And so this made him respect his mechanics, because they were able to deal with such components that are not trivial. And we need to show this to the public. We need to show this to the fan, and this may interest more people than we thought. Then you have the people that are not interested in racing, and it's very important because I don't know the situation here, but in Europe there is a huge trend about, well, motor racing is just burning fuel, is useless. So if you want these guys to let you do your job or enjoy motor racing, you need to justify why you are there. You need to justify that you are progressing on the technology and you are developing technology that may have sense for production cars. And if you do that and you demonstrate it and you advertise it, then there is a tiny possibility that they accept you and that you can run on Sunday. If not, well, what's about? We're just burning fuel, we are taking risk in now a society that is not accepting that someone may kill himself by passion, and we need to be careful about that, because in Europe at least, I'm almost sure that if there is an important accident, it may be that some countries they just stop motor racing because it's not understandable for some people. So I think that looking to these two categories of people, bringing more technology into motor racing is helpful and will help sustain motor racing in the future. Then the car manufacturers. Obviously, the spec formula for car manufacturers is useless. The only interest for them is to prove that they have a good product or at least a good technology that you could, in a way or another, find into the car you can buy. Clearly, when we built the Formula One regulation, some manufacturers, I would say, around the table, were interested into it. Some engineers were interested because if we had not had this regulation, their company would have stopped Formula One. So the only way to interest manufacturers to racing, Formula One, other formulas, obviously, is that they understand the link between what we are doing and their product. And this is through technology. Then you have the racing industry. I think that single-make formula or spec formula are very dangerous for the industry. Because for $1, how many other manufacturers, Ralt, Marsh, Lola, are not there now? So we need to be careful that we grow the industry into maybe one or two successful company, but with no other choice. And the more we will go, the more we will go to this company to have this spec formula, because there is no other option. And I think this is not good for our industry, because if we go the same for spec engine, for spec gearbox, for spec cars, then you just destroy our industry. And I cannot agree with that.
I think those are all very good points. So, Richard, from your point of view, in terms of being involved with fuels, fuel is a classic example of something that none of us can see. It's not a tire. It's not a ground effect. It's not a wing. So the technological development really is for you guys internally. Can you talk a little bit about the value of that to the company? And do you have a view yourself here on the spec car syndrome, the technical development in racing, and what value that in itself has?
And the spec fuels. There are a lot of formula where there is a spec fuel.
Well, indeed there are.
Okay, thanks. So Shell as a global concept and strategy is focusing on technology. That's our direction to stay and be competitive in the industry, the energy industry. And as shown on my presentation today, it's for us relevant to use motorsport as a track-to-road concept. That's very important because the fuel and lubricants development for the racing drivetrains is relevant for the road as well, and that's why I'm 100% with Jill as well, that we need the manufacturers here in order to really ensure that the road relevance of the technologies which are developed is really given. And we need competition in technology. That's very important. And spec race series are a risk on that one. Of course, it's easier, but it's not going to help to convince and substantiate our effort in our all-together effort in racing application. Because you need a fuel. You will need a fuel in the future for a long time to go for racing, and it produces CO2 emissions, and it is some energy. Also, the relation to other emissions is very low. I made a comparison in my presentation today. We are now 7 billion people around the world, and a single person has a CO2 footprint of about 4 tons, world average. That gives you about 30 billion of CO2 per year. And compared this one to, let's say, 24-hour race in Le Mans, which is once a year as well, the emission figure just from the cars there is about 400 tons. So 30 billion against 400. It's not satisfying the race activity, but it explains the relation and that it's not really a big one. I think what we need to address in future rule books, and I'm also involved in the next Le Mans regulation development from a fuels perspective, is that we need to address what is needed for the road application in the next 10 to 15 years. And the only thing which is helping us to use less oil or to use less energy is we need to improve the efficiency of the combustion and drivetrain, and we need to use biofuels. And this combination is very important. Biofuels should be advanced, high quality, in order to enable next generation engine design, like direct injection technology and all these things. So, and this, in order to really have efficiency as a driver and a platform, the focus, that's something where you need what Scott already also said about 2014 regulation, that you need the energy amount must be allocated in future. And that's something, for example, in MotoGP is already the case. They have tank sizes limited. They have no refueling, of course, and the tank size limit has been reduced year by year. And that's the right competition, that you can develop the right fuel-engine interaction in terms of efficiency. And if you achieve a better result, if you get 1 or 2% out of your standard efficiency level, and this can be applied afterwards to the road application because the manufacturers are involved, then you can have a benefit for all of the 7 billion people, which are hopefully not everybody will have a car in the future.
We've had great discussions here over the past couple of days about electric technology, progress there, growth of hybrids. Scott's made the point that it's really beginning to come on in the IMIS, and he expects much more of that over the next few years. From your point of view, how do you see that? Many people believe that the internal combustion engine is going to still be, the basic engine for the next 20 or 30 years, and that the electrification and hybrids are not going to wash over and take over this. Do you have any opinion on that particular front from your perspective?
Electric cars, electric mobility is important. It will have a future, at least at big cities, especially also from a smog perspective. Long-range things are difficult, and diesel and gasoline engine, combustion engines will have their place for a couple of decades to come. There's our perspective is to say at least 50%, even in 2050, will be combustion engines still, and of course improved and advanced systems compared to now are yearly developed in racing application. So electric mobility is relevant, important, but we need to get the energy production of electricity right. As long as we do it with fossil energies, fossil resources, it's not going to make a benefit for the planet, for the global warming and the CO2 footprint. As long as the electricity is not produced on a zero emission basis, you're worse with electric cars, besides the battery disposal and these things, compared to any combustion engine.
I'd like to add a quick comment about the electrification penetration that you talked about. To put it in perspective, the United States, just the United States, not globally, has, I think, about 250 million vehicles on the road that are in use, somewhere thereabouts. And right now the market is, as Scotty mentioned, is about it's about 12 million per year annually. So let's put that in perspective. If tomorrow the magic technology happened that we had perfect battery, not perfect batteries, but batteries that would work in the whole electric modules of vehicles, and if we were to sell 100% electric vehicles tomorrow, you're still talking about having to replace a fleet of 200 and 250 million vehicles. But obviously, we're not selling 100% electric vehicles, it's a fraction of a percent, and so that penetration curve of that technology is going to be a long time.
However, to work, I think to work on electric cars in racing or on hybrid cars is just a good opportunity to develop this technology, and it's quite fun. So we should work on that too.
Why is that fun? I don't see any fun in that.
Well, to find performance is fun, generally. Personally, I had to work on a curse system, and due to the fact that in Formula One engine was frozen, it was the only way to have some fun. And to develop properly a curse system, it was not that easy, and you have to face very different problems that you are not used to do. Okay, it's not about fuel injection, it's about the efficiency of the electric motor, about the efficiency of the power electronics, about the cooling of the battery, and you know what? To cool properly a battery of, let's say, 60 elements, where if one element is going out of the range in temperature, you need to stop the system because they are all in line. That means that you need to be very precise cooling, and it is at least as complicated as cooling a cylinder head. And this is the same technology used and the same knowledge. And this, we know how to do it.
I don't think that's why he said why. I mean, I think why he said why, and maybe I'm wrong, Paul, but we're fed all this stuff by the manufacturers about what we're supposed to be doing with these hybrids and these sort of things, when we know that one of our biggest emission problems is the generation of electricity in the United States by coal, the recycling of the batteries that was mentioned, and there are other things that, I mean, I'm not saying that it shouldn't happen or it won't happen, but there are a lot of real big problems right now that need to be taken care of, which maybe racing should be doing that. And I like the idea of cures and that sort of thing, but I don't know that we're in a situation yet where these kind of things really add a practical element to our ability to protect our environment. And I hold that different from what I'd like to see in racing, because I think the engineering challenges for racing are different, and I like that activity. But I think that from a marketing scope, we're being sold things that really don't fit, not at this time.
Yeah, well, I would just like, those two things, the battery and the curves, well, those are bombs in energy density. I don't want those in my car. I don't want all that energy in a little bitty package under my seat.
Honestly speaking, in a Curse battery, you have 400 megajoule. Okay? So what does it mean? It is the content of energy.
I don't want to pay for it either. Okay. And I don't want my tax dollars going to support it.
This is another topic. We're speaking about racing. What I can say is that the energy content of a Curse battery is something like a low-fat yogurt. So it's very low. And even if you burn it, because this happens in motor racing, you have really no huge problem. I can tell you that we have had some problem on the bench and so on. It's less spectacular than when you have a fuel fire in the bench, and this also happens. So when you are doing motor racing, you take risk. But you are professional guys, you know how to act, and you know how to limit the problems. And that's all about motor racing. I don't see a big problem if we have to develop electric systems. We develop as we develop engines. We are engineers.
David.
If you go back to Richard's presentation on the future of fuels and energy sources in motorsport, he painted a picture of a series of overlapping challenges and said that there could be big gains for internal combustion engines in the near term, and that big gains for EVs might take quite a bit longer. But racing can start to play a role in working on solutions in all those areas now. Even if the big gains are 10 years away, but why not? What tax dollars pay for racing?
Will fans come to see a car that doesn't make any noise?
Let the market decide.
But the market is not being allowed to make.
In motorsport?
It's government and politics.
No, in motorsport. that's down to rules makers and series organizers and sanctioning bodies.
Yeah, okay, all right.
I don't understand this issue on the noise. Honest to God, I don't understand it. People say they need to have the noise. We have sound designers that can take a 4-cylinder engine and make it sound like a 12-cylinder Ferrari. It's nonsense about the noise.
I would wholeheartedly disagree with you. And
Okay, 11 cylinders.
The sound, well, not on that. They may be able to do that, and if they can do that, I think it's an excellent thing.
They can.
What I'm telling you is that when you go to a race for an average fan, the experience is tactile and sensual. It's not just seeing who crosses the finish line first. There's a huge visual component, and there's a huge sound component. There is nothing like an 8,000 horsepower top fuel dragster standing there. You feel it, you hear it, you sense it, you smell it even. Okay? And they're rolling billboards. To say that you're going to turn those into electric vehicles is going to take away a tremendous, tremendous amount of the experiential that you're going to walk away from a race.
I agree with you, but is it worth going to war 3 times in 10 years?
Well, this discussion is not a geopolitical discussion.
It absolutely is going to be.
It may be. What this discussion is.
Ask
is the
Aragon
future.
Labs where it's going, where the Defense Department is concerned.
Let me throw a little monkey wrench in this whole discussion. This is a hypothetical, but we're not going to get political here, but it is a consideration. So, but let's just say, for example, the issue about this is environment. We're talking about environment, sustainability. So ultimately, easy petroleum will be gone. Ultimately, it won't never disappear. It's just going to get too expensive. It's going to be like diamonds, and you can't afford it, so we have to use something else. Unicorns, I don't know, whatever, something. Okay. So let's just take a 30,000. And I've had this discussion with my coworkers at work, and they look at me like I'm crazy when I say it. They say, "You're right." What's the issue? It's sustainability. So let's just imagine that we have a liquid fuel that wasn't something you dug out of the ground and burned and turned into water and CO2 and got rid of it. You took a high-value commodity and got rid of it, made it a low-value commodity. It was sustainable year in, year out, and that the emissions were relatively low. The criteria emissions, you could deal with that. And basically, the technology is there to basically deal with that. And that it was relatively affordable, and that it didn't greatly contribute to your greenhouse gas impact. Does that sound? And so why would there ever be a reason to get rid of an engine? Why? There wouldn't be. The material in the engine can be recycled. You know, the other energy sources in the world, whether it's nuclear or whatever, can be made, in the long run, can become sustainable. Solar, wind, nuclear, breeder reactors, the whole deal. Well, guess what? That exists right now. That technology's here. Second generation biofuels are here. Richard and his group, I'm sure, are working like crazy on this stuff, but some of it's already come to market on a small, very small level. Racing doesn't take that much to displace all of its energy uses for that. There's oil. G-oil makes racing oil from animal fat. It's sustainable. This stuff happens now. And at that point, just for sake of argument, to open up to the floor and everybody, why do we have to go to these other technologies? Why electrification? If you have electric fuel now that can deal with it, why? Now, I think I have an answer. It's volume. We don't make it. The United States consumes 20 million barrels of oil a day. 70% of that's for transportation. So, and you're not going to put some of these fuels into trucks or diesel. So, you know, I'm going to open this up. I think, and maybe Richard has. He knows this industry better than I ever will. I mean, he'll have a perspective on that we could share. But I mean, some of that is there. And if I know if I worked for an oil company, that's what I'd be pushing for. That's our business. And we should thank them for this energy source that they've made so good for this last century. It's unbelievable what we've done in the world with that. But we have to think about the next 100 years and 200 and 500 years ultimately. So.
Yeah, fully agree. Racing application, motorsport is for us an attractive opportunity to show the ability or the performance of next generation technology, next generation fuels, advanced biofuels, and that they are going to work on a high performance level in a race car. It's of course also convenient to use advanced biofuels in racing first because we cannot roll it out overnight to all the fuel stations we've got here in North America, for example. That's not working because you need to grow step by step. If you are developing a new technology on advanced biofuels, and you do it on a more small scale basis first, and it takes not years, it takes a decade or more until you are really ready to go for commercial scale plant production, which is affordable to the end for the consumer. Therefore, motorsport and racing is a very attractive opportunity to convince that these type of new energy sources are going to work and that they are successfully applied in modern engines, which hopefully will be seen on the road afterwards. That's again why this is a concept for Shell, and also along with the car manufacturers being active in motorsport.
Yeah.
I've been floating back and forth between both sides of the Atlantic Ocean, and have been on the vanguard of some of the most progressive projects in the sport in the last 5 years. I don't think, from what I can see on this side of the water, other than the ALMS, there's going to be any serious attempts to adjust motor racing to the future, because basically the existing inventories built around entertainment, and there's no interest or incentive to change whatsoever. On the other side of the water in Europe, there's a great emphasis for people to change, because we are already paying $7, $8, $9 a gallon for gasoline, whereas over here it's cheap. And is it on or off? Doesn't make a difference. So you have a totally different situation in Europe versus North America, where I happen to live in a country that's the most wealthy country in Europe. We were the last of the large car markets, being BMWs, Mercedes, etc. But the people themselves, on base of pure prudence, have downsized. So if you go to see a Hyundai dealership, you'll see BMWs, Alfa Romeos, etc. traded in against Hyundais. And we're reacting on the motor racing on that side of the water, whereas, just as you point out, when the #1 selling car is the pickup truck, 6 cylinders, there's no real incentive because the fuel here is still cheap. And until the people who are in the entertainment side of the racing business here, which is the powerful side, has an incentive, and the public itself has an incentive to save energy, you're not going to get any change. And as much as the automobile industry pays lip service to it, when it came time to choose between i4, direct injected, turbocharged, they chose V6, and Formula One did the same. And when I hear it's for noise, I have to say it's totally ridiculous. We have Hollywood can make sound, and sound designers can make sound. It's not logical, but it's the way it is.
Those are all great points. Before we, Michael, did you want to add something?
I would very much like to hear what Bob Wildberg and Cheryl Archer.
Absolutely. That was, thank you very much. That was my next point. And just before we bring Cheryl in, Bob comes at this from a very different perspective. He's most recently been involved with the SCCA and trying to get them headed. So it's much more of a club racing thing rather than the major manufacturers and so forth. So I think Bob has a very different perspective to offer on this. Let's hear what he has to say.
Hopefully I'll have the technology to work here. I know there's a lot of technology people in the room. Can someone help me out how I get this started? Well, I've got some slides.
Let the projector time down.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, what do I do next? Anyone know? It says
Press on the dial. Put the cursor on the dial.
Yes, okay. Ooh, here we go. Yeah. Still thinking? Okay. Almost there.
Hit F5. 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 Maybe function F5.
Go up to the top where it says play.
Oh, look at that.
Well done.
Goodness gracious. I'm Bob Wahlberger. Thank you very much. I do come at this from a little different perspective. I'm going to talk a little more about the business of motorsports and where that's going. I won't profess to be the only expert. I do have a lot of friends in the business. So I cheated and I talked to people, you know, like Walt Zarnicki and Don Schumacher and some of those folks, so that I could get a good collection of thinking, if you will, as to where motorsports is going. Just a footnote on where I've come from. I was the CEO of SCCA Pro Racing, and we have Jeff Daner in the room, who was CEO of SCCA overall, which is more the club racing avenue. So I was dealing, in fact, with the manufacturers and the same kinds of issues that IMIS and everybody else has to deal with. And the business is getting more difficult, and I want to talk about that for a moment. Just before we begin that, I just wanted to point out it's better to be a leader than a follower, and we'll move on from there. Okay, my agenda very quickly. I want to talk a little bit about the economy, how that plays into motorsports, what we have for competition, as has been pointed out a little bit earlier, motorsports goals, some of the individual issues. I'm going to touch on alternative fuels, although we've got other experts here, so I'm not going to try to take their steam for sure. And another thing that I think has really come into motorsports into play very, very nicely and respectfully is the world of education is recognizing motorsports. That's going to play big in the future, 5, 10, 20 years from now. First of all, we should always be respectful of lessons we learned from the past and honor our history, but we also must move toward a vibrant and innovative future. So let's learn from the past, but don't dwell on it, because there are some things that will never be the same again. One of them is we've gone through a global disaster, basically, in terms of the economy. We've been living through it. We're all surviving it. Congratulations to everyone in this room, because you are. 2008 was a terrible disaster. And what do we have in the world of motorsports? How do we get our money? It's a money machine. You may like that or not. It is. If we don't have fans, we don't have sponsors, we don't have money, we don't race. That's as simple as that. And our funds come from either corporate marketing or they come from disposable income. Jeff, for instance, most of his people, they've got to get their money from disposable income. They want to go have fun, and they need the money to do that. So what happened in 2008, one of the first things that fell off all the marketing budgets of major companies was motorsports. Didn't go completely off, thank God, but a lot of it did. It certainly got smaller. And when it comes to the individuals that pay for their own racing out there, in so many venues, what happened? Well, a lot of them took a cut. Or began to worry about where the money had to go, or how to make the payments on their house, or all the different problems that they had. So a lot of the disposable income went away, and we all have had to adjust and deal with that. I'm saying that's 2008 through 2013. I don't know if I've got that right. It's certainly, motorsports is one of the first things to come off of those lists. Unfortunately, it's also one of the last things to come back on the list. So if 2012, we finally get the tables turned on this economic problems that we've got worldwide, and it might even be 2013. It may take another year or two before you start to see those motorsports items that we would like to see back on the corporate and sponsored budgets, so we start to feed those back into our business. So the idea is we're going to be lean for a while. We've got to look for other ways to do business to keep it going, and then hopefully when the economy turns, that's going to refortify some of what we've lost in the past. Here's what we're dealing with a little bit. A little bit of a remember when. I look around the audience, and I think most of you will remember. There's a few that won't. But remember when we only had 3 networks, and televised sports was strictly mainstream motorsports and traditional stick and ball sports. That was it. Otherwise, you had Leave It to Beaver, and you had some good household shows, some good news shows. Those were people's choices. Unfortunately, I do remember that show's a little bit of age, but better be older than not get there. What do we have now? Over 300 network channels of some kind. And motorsports battles for an audience with other kinds of competition that I won't read through the list, but I mean, you've got everything from street fighting to cage fighting to poker to you name it. Storage wars, for God's sake, they even make a contest out of that now. And I'll even point out Red Bull. Unfortunately, we've lost them in a lot of our motorsports recently. They just invented crushed ice. It's a new sport with using a lot of professional hockey players or people that know ice skating really well. So as we try to gain audience as motorsports businesses, we need to compete with all these eyeballs. And like I said, the one gentleman said earlier today, I went to look up this list, and I think I put in the word sports in the website, and about the first 10 things that came up weren't real sports. They were sports that had to do with some kind of an electronic game. They weren't even things that were really happening with real people. So we have our challenges, but we're making it. That's a good thing. Some of the common goals that, as I talk to sanctioned bodies, even having run one myself, we're all trying to get fans that are younger. I mean, we know eventually people do die, and we need to make sure new people come in to replace those and or grow the sport. So how do we get to those young people? That's a tricky question. We all need greater numbers of eyeballs on television. Again, you got 300 channels or 400 instead of 3, so that becomes a little tougher to do that. Some of the ways for both the youth and the substitute for TV, I'll call it, is some of the breakthroughs in social media. And I think some of the sanctioned bodies are doing a much better job than others. But I don't think anyone in this room can even envision where social media will be just 36 months from now. That's probably one of the biggest areas of survival we all need to address and get our marketing people to address. There's a lot coming, and it's coming fast. As it was said before, it's changing daily. Business to business. I remember when I was at Chrysler running motorsports 5 years ago, doing an awful lot of analysis and working on what was called business to business. But as I talk to some of the leaders today, they really are doing business to business. It's part of the reason they're getting some new sponsorship deals is they're writing in the contracts that they will put them in front of X amount of other kinds of customers, maybe wholesalers, that will buy their product, and some of their sponsorship is actually being measured by revenue. And the revenue doesn't prove out through the B2B relationships. They don't get as much money from sponsorship. So it's a whole different business model that's coming together. The business objectives are getting tougher. The world's tougher in business. We're all living through it, but we're all doing it. Last but not least, new return on investment metrics. I can tell you that my last couple of years at Chrysler Corporation, it was hard. Well, my whole life there, I think, it was very hard to sell motorsports, and that's an understatement. And so, being able to try to prove a return on that investment was very, very difficult. It still is today, but the better job people can do of it, the better job they have at trying to get those newfound monies to come into the business. And last but not leastly on that, there's a whole new business model being developed here with sponsorships. It is no longer, hey, I'm going to put your name on a car and give me a check, and I'll see you next year. Those days are gone, and in my belief, it's gone forever. And what we're developing now will become the new norm of the future. So we need to get used to it, get more creative, and make sure we fund ourselves, we'll also keep on racing because that's what we all want to do. Another area I want to touch on, this is more of a safety one, and it's just a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. I just wanted to share it and encourage anyone in a sanctioning body to just every year relook at this. And it's what I always call technical creep. You know, if you give somebody a shoebox, and that's your dimensions, whether it's Formula One, it's NASCAR, it's a CCA, whatever it is, you're all involved in it. You give someone a shoebox, that's the dimension of your specifications that you can race in, and no more. And that may slow them down. Maybe this year you give them a smaller shoebox, it slows them down a little bit. But doggone, people in motorsports are smart as hell. And you know what? 3 years, they're going to figure out how to go just as fast as they were going today with that new shoebox tomorrow. So for safety's sake, so we don't lose people in our sport, our business, but we don't want to lose drivers. We need to keep watch on that and look at, I would say look at annually. Every 3 or 4 years, things need to be done, if not more frequently, so that we don't lose people. It's real easy for that to get away from us. It's been a problem forever. And another reason it's a problem, and I always, it's again something I personally have dealt with, and I encourage everyone to deal with it. There's always a propensity that when somebody's faster, and obviously this is not spec cars. Everyone in the panel, I think, we have. I'm not talking about spec cars here, right? You got all these different cars out there racing. And someone's always going to be faster. So the habits we have all that have been around for 50 years is let's slow down those front runners and slow down those. I'm sorry, let's speed up the back markers. You never slow down anybody. You always speed up the back markers, right? Oh my God, somebody's come in and they're the biggest criers there are, and you know they need 2 more cylinders. I'm making it up and being stupid with that, of course, but you know they need another pound of boost. We always speed up the slow guys. And I would encourage everyone to keep looking as they operate their sanctioning bodies for safety's sake. It's not popular, but slow down the fast guys. Because over time, and I've been there, done it, you speed up the slow guys after a period of 3 years, man, you've got everyone flying around the track. So that's just, from the standpoint of safety and equality, that's my words of wisdom on that note. Talking about some of the individual sanctioning bodies, I'm going to go pretty fast because I know we're short on time, but NASCAR, and having talked to them and worked with them a lot, they are working hard to attract youth, and they're doing it mostly through social media. They've done some pretty good things there. There's a little bit of a tendency towards some shorter races. That's for a variety of reasons, but it's basically, you know, time and attention. And like everyone else, it's the battle of sponsorships. It's the loss of Red Bull and some of the teams like that. So we've all got to be working with teams to try to keep costs down enough so that we can keep everybody in the sport. They're looking. They went in one direction for a while. They're starting to look. Not starting. They are looking really hard at trying to reintroduce more relevancy back into the look of the cars, like the Mustang, the Challenger, and the Nationwide Series. But they know that they need to dial in some relevancy because for the manufacturers to keep them interested. Their fuel injection is in for next year. That's another. For NASCAR, that's a big change, of course. It certainly is going to hurt the carburetor people, right? The use of Cup chassis nationwide is going to help repair drivers to migrate more into Cup, and they're forcing more attention to the to-be champions of the lower level series, so that it isn't Cup drivers winning all the championships at all levels. So that's kind of the direction NASCAR is going. ARCA. Interesting discussion with them. They were probably first and foremost, they and NHRA, when I got into the discussions of the business of sponsorships, the business and the fact that model is totally different. The Ron Drager quote is he's now working harder for less and he's very happy for it. But they have had to go into sponsorships where they are measured by sales revenues and B2B relationships, and that's how their checks or their sponsorships come to them. And the good news is their year-end banquets are up, the participation is good, and they are working very hard also to cut costs to help teams do that. Where's motorsports going? From a broad perspective, when I look at NASCAR, ARCA, Grand Am, SCCA, NASA, and a lot more, when I say future, I'll talk 5 years. The future is going to continue to be sheet metal, fossil fuel, and internal combustion. Fans thrive on it. Maybe engineers can make different sounds and other people can do things, but at least for the near term, the fan dollar is going to drive that into the larger sports. IRL, great racing, great heritage, here to stay. They share the challenges everyone else does, looking for more eyeballs, both in TV packages and the seats. And that's driven by sponsorships again. Everyone's got that key issue. And the new Delar and the Aero Kit direction, they're making some good positive changes and moving forward. They're not sitting still. So congrats to them. NHRA, I consider that a little bit of a hidden gem. They have such a great live show that their TV show also is great. One seems to follow the other pretty good. Again, they're working more toward social media to try to attract younger fans. They've had a couple races from a safety standpoint. They did a really good job with the shortening of the racetrack and length. It's safer, it's closer, it's less mechanical failures. USAC, a couple comments there. They are experimenting with some electric cars. It won't be mainstream, but at least I give them credit. They're trying to look at the future somewhat there. Drifting and rally tend to be more youthful, and we're seeing that grow more overseas, actually. Alternative fuels, just a couple of quick comments there. More and more, they're finding their niches in motorsports in the near term. I don't think you're going to see alternative fuel racing selling tickets. The good news is it is more likely to bring in some sponsors that would not be available to us yesterday. I mentioned in the last, but this is my last slide, I mentioned the educational thing. I think it's a great tribute to our industry that more and more colleges are creating either marketing degrees in motorsports or more motorsports engineering curriculums, and I think that's a very positive thing to bring that education in a much heavier level. And I congratulate SCCA or SAE. Sorry, I congratulate SAE on their race programs in many of the engineering schools. I can tell you, as a sanctioning body, when I looked for an engineer, I made sure that they were one of the people involved in that program because it was very, very relevant. And with that, thank you for all your time and attention, and good luck in the future to all of you.
Great, thanks, Bob. I think that emphasized in many ways, Bob, the great diversity of the sport, the wide variety of the many different types of kinds of racing, and that everybody has a different perspective on things. So it's a very, very complicated sport that advantages we don't have, we've discussed. Now, Cheryl, as you know, is the CEO of Panko Manufacturing, who produce superb, high-quality engine components, crankshafts, and so forth. She's also involved in the Motorsports Suppliers Group. So she comes at it from yet another, a very different perspective, and so forth. Cheryl, if you could begin to address us and perhaps begin by discussing about what the challenges in today's changing environment are for a company like you, and how all of this affects the supply of chemicals.
Sure. I was going to ask you about that because I saw your agenda, and let's see what happens with mine.
I wish I would have known.
Gordon?
Oh,
I think she pulled out the
network.
Machine, it doesn't work. It wasn't working.
the connector is out, I believe.
Right here.
Yeah.
Aha.
That might be. Yeah, because I was working on the machine, so yeah.
Okay, technology. Exactly what we've been talking about.
Yeah, we are.
High tech indeed.
You're going to push the button? Yeah.
Okay, last but not least, so I come from a very different perspective. First, I'm a supplier. Second, I'm not an engineer. And third, I'm a woman. So I happen to be, thank you very much, the CEO of Superior Crankshaft. Superior was sold at the end of July to Pankel Racing Systems. What sometimes gets forgotten with that transition is that Mr. Pankel, the founder of Pankel Racing, sold his shares back in 2005, and Superior was actually his last, what we will call baby. And so we are now integrated into Pankel Racing Systems with the headquarters in Austria. Manufacturing of the crankshaft still remains in Irvine, California. We still keep our branding as Superior for now, but eventually we'll phase that out. And the name of the company now in Irvine, California is Pankel Engine Systems, Inc. So Pankel is a very interesting company. We've always been involved in high-end motorsports, and really technology is our spirit. For a while, 100% of Formula One connecting rods were supplied by Pankel. We intend to get back there. The problem is, and it's said beautifully by the panel here already, is that sometimes racing, and most of the time racing is governed by the rule book. So as the need for cost reduction and engines running longer and fuel engine builds on the track, we have to go looking into other markets as well. So Pankel's going to be no different. So Superior has been a supplier to high-end racing for a long time, but due to the lower quantities now, due to the rule book changes that we have, we're going to have to start going lower and lower into the supply chain. We have absolutely no interest in spec engines. You'll never find a Pankel component in a spec engine. That's not racing to us. Technology is in our spirit and in our lifeblood. And spec engines will not help high-end racing or high-end motorsports whatsoever. Earlier today in the first session of the morning, there was a great discussion about bringing in young people into the industry. From my perspective, when I started to see our volumes go down, and the only way to keep the lifeblood of my company going was to go into some of the lower markets, bring up the quantities, and keep my technicians, my engineers with a paycheck, I started to look into grassroots racing to see what I could do to bring higher technology at a lower cost, because that's the responsibility of a supplier, into that industry. I ended up sponsoring a race car in grassroots racing in the Southwest Racing League, the SRL. And that is an open spec. They have all kinds of engines, all kinds of Chevys, Fords, maybe a few Chryslers. I brought a Toyota in. You should have heard the backlash on that one, but it was what the team could afford and what the team wanted to run. And just to give you some quick numbers, because I pulled them up last night because I thought it would be really interesting to look at it, because I was hearing that the number of entries into some of these open engine race series were going down. In 2011, the SRL, in the top 3 driver points, were separated by 48 points, separated first to third place. Only 48 points. They had 5 different winners. 17 rookies entered the race series this year. That's twice as many as they had enter last year. 43 drivers took the green. Sometimes the field was 27, sometimes it was 43. And 22 average teams were there per event, which was 25% more than they had last year. So it's important to make sure that short track racing is viable in the future, and it's important to bring cost savings to all levels of racing, but it's also important for the engine builders to tune their engines and find more horsepower. That's what we do. That's what racing is. So from my experience in aerospace, I know that the supply chain is an invaluable source of information, an invaluable asset to be able to bring to the table some of the things that we know that we can help with the cost savings, with alternative fuels, with electric engines, whatever it happens to be. And I wanted to start looking at a motorsport supplier advisory group that brought these suppliers together with the sanctioning bodies to provide advice and direction. Provide advice and direction on all technical and strategic issues in order to ensure cost-effective solutions and supply chain viability. If we don't continue to grow and develop this sport, our supply chain will dry up. There will be very few suppliers left, and there won't be cost savings. Because as my customers dry up and the volume that my customer needs dries up, I have to increase my prices. Because I have overhead, I have a business to run. So if we do not try to sustain our suppliers and allow our suppliers to help give feedback on coming to cost-effective solutions, prices will go up. There's no doubt about it. So the focus is to provide a collaborative effort between the sanctioning bodies and suppliers regarding the regulation changes for current and future race series. We need to start that collaboration now. The structure would be that the executive board has members of the sanctioning bodies and supply chain representatives, and the chairman of that executive board will drive the organization and development of the group, and the executive director would be responsible for day-to-day operation. Now, this is all in concept. I've already spoken with a number of members of various sanctioning bodies. We already have a good feel for what their thinking is and what some of their challenges are, and also from last year's town hall meeting, what some of our challenges will be as well. But ultimately, the executive board would have representation from the engine side, the chassis, suspension, safety, drivetrain, and tires. So we would have an executive board made up of representation from each of those segments and be able to pull in the expertise that's needed to meet with the sanctioning bodies through the executive board. The executive board would be the primary source of expertise to draw upon technical reviews of proposals from the sanctioning bodies. And the executive board would have a dual role to serve as the voice of their constituents, so whether it's chassis, engine, tires, safety, etc., to raise the issues to the sanctioning bodies, and to assist in communicating the results from the meetings with the sanctioning bodies back down into the supplier community. And again, this is a very consensual process, so there's the give and take on both sides. You know, consensus being, I can live with that. Doesn't mean that I like it, but I can live with that. And then externally, the members of the supervisory, supplier advisory group would be ambassadors for the motorsports, maintaining links between the stakeholders in the sanctioning body and the motorsports community itself. And some of that is educating our fans up there. The executive operates mainly through email, social media, teleconference, and face-to-face meetings, such as here at the conference at IMIS. And it has no formal voting procedures and operates on a simple principle of consultations, again, striving towards consensus. So this is a model that we've been constructing over time. We've got the information out there on LinkedIn, and we have almost 150 members now. Many of you have already written to me saying, you know, that you're willing to help and support this. I really am committed to taking this to the next level this year because I see it's needed more and more. Because in a lot of our conversations today, I haven't heard a lot about the supply chain come up. And it's absolutely critical that we keep that supply chain in mind, because any regulation that comes out now with any of the sanctioning bodies is going to affect this ever-decreasing supply chain that we have. And the technology that will be lost will be substantial. Thank you for your time.
Excuse me. This is a really interesting initiative. How will you or would you make your case to the sanctioning bodies for open competition? How do you confront the logic or illogic of spec racing with that audience that you're going to focus on?
Sure, and that's a great question, and we haven't addressed that specifically yet with the sanctioning bodies that we've met with. The sanctioning bodies that we've met with, we've really had a very high-level conversation about the interest that they may have in working with a body such as the advisory group. So we haven't gone to any specific issues in the meetings that we've had so far, NASCAR, USAC, ALMS, etc.
But is that principle of open competition, is that pretty much set as one of your guiding principles? Or?
It's only my opinion. That is not a guiding principle of the...
What's your perception of what the supplier community as a whole thinks?
To be honest with you, I haven't talked with a lot of suppliers specifically about that issue. I can only say from Henkel Racing side, with the rods, pistons, drivetrain, etc. that we have, that we're not interested in participating in those markets whatsoever.
Is this something you're proposing, or is this something that already exists?
It's something that we're working on at this point in time. We've got the structure, we've had the meetings, the LinkedIn site is up, people have shown an interest in it, and I think this year will be the year when we start to pull together some people that are interested in and actually have a meeting of the mind, so to speak, and start having some conversations exactly about these things.
To my knowledge, this kind of thing has not happened before. Is that right, Scott? Other people, sanctioning bodies have just kind of done whatever they wanted and really didn't care much about their supply chain. Is that wrong?
I think it's a fair statement.
Huh?
I think that's a fair statement.
Have you had any discussions about open source?
No. Not yet. Everything right now has been really, how would you be willing to work with a group like this, and what kind of challenges do you see, what kind of barriers would you have to working with a group like this? So nothing specific about open spec fuels, nothing like that. So it's just been very, very high level. But keep in mind, a lot of the regulations that are brought out without consultation to the supply chain may not be the most cost-effective solutions.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Consultation with the supply chain, we could have come to a completely different decision that would have had cost savings for the team. At least we would have discussed it. Maybe the sanctioning body will still make their decision. That's their prerogative. But at least they would have consulted, maybe looked at some different options, and then made a decision.
Sure, I would throw in that CART did have committee meetings with the suppliers, everything from chassis manufacturers, engine manufacturers, a rules committee where all these people were equally represented. But ultimately, the decisions that govern what the rules were made by the owners. Okay, and that was the controlling body of that sanctioning body, and it was very hard, not impossible, but very hard to get them to move in a timely and direct manner so that the results of what you're trying to accomplish really were accomplished. But there was much more freedom and much more open activity between the manufacturers and the other suppliers. I mean, there was a time when they wanted to have spec wheels or spec brakes or spec clutches or whatever, things that I personally objected to because I thought that the suppliers market needed to be open, because a couple things that happen when you do have an individual supplier for these things is that when you're bound to that supplier, you're bound to the economy and the price caps that supplier seeks to impose over the years. And secondly, any product malfunction or anything can affect the entire series, as opposed to the fact that you've got people competing and the products and qualities and design and competitiveness change from time to time, which sort of evens out the ability for good, honest suppliers to be competitive.
Exactly, and in no way do we want to take away
No.
from that competitiveness in the supply chain either, because that's where you get some better technology, better cost savings as well, just in your supply chain. So I'm not for sole sourcing at all.
No.
The problem you have is that in the case of designing a new chassis, we've pushed the cost and the requirements of safety so high to design and develop a new race car. $5 million is basically a minimum with wind tunnel testing or something. $5 million is a huge chunk of money for a constructor. But we're only talking a couple in the whole world that are left.
Yes.
So do we reduce the safety? Do we
I
reduce
don't
the
think that
thinking?
wind tunnel testing is for safety.
Huh?
I don't think that wind tunnel testing is for safety.
I didn't say wind tunnel testing, but for IRL, the whole thing was about safety cell.
Well, I don't quite agree with that. From the information that I got, there were other objectives there, and the people that should have been involved in some of the safety criteria were overlooked. I think IRL made a decision based on other objectives. I'm not sure what they were, but I think there was an opportunity or lost, or at least an opportunity delayed when the Delta Wing project wasn't really a real consideration to where they were going.
I'm not talking
and
about
the Delta Wing. You're talking. What
I'm talking about $5 million for 4 race car constructors,
Yes.
which is what her point is, and I agree with her. But at $5 million a chassis, regardless of whether it was Lola or whoever, is prohibitive. One reason is because our safety costs are so significant, and nobody's backing off and saying we should back off on the safety, but the cost is so phenomenal now, it's difficult to have open. And that's where the conversation kind of ended, so they chose one, which...
So you're referring open source to the chassis in particular?
No, I would have thinking you would have gotten a lot better race car for Indy today if you had 4 chassis manufacturers trying to do it.
Yes.
But that involved $5 million per chassis manufacturer, and that money's not there.
And I can't speak to that because I wasn't involved in that process.
I can't speak to the $5 million situation either.
I can.
But I do know that there are other chassis manufacturers that's involved with the Indy cars has just produced probably one of the safest sedan cars that's ever been made for racing for the German touring cars, where there is competition amongst manufacturers. And so I think the safety argument is something that needs to be examined, because I think it's inconsistent to put safety on a pedestal here that doesn't reflect what needs to be happening in the sport. There isn't any manufacturer that can endure his product being related to a situation that appears to be barbaric or unconsiderate of other people. My point was that there's a lot of things that are happening. There are a lot of things that change. People no longer get up in the morning and read the morning paper. They no longer rush on to see the evening news. So we've got a totally different situation. And the Delta Wing concept, which embraced more than a car, it embraced a new look, which I thought was important. It was, according to the things that embodied, it was a cheaper way to build a chassis. It was a more substantially safe chassis. It was a better chassis for dynamic stability on ovals. Like I said, it had a new look. There was an interactive program for fans to get involved with that. They embraced the situation called open source, which I don't think has been discussed too much amongst manufacturers. But open source, I think, really is the answer to a lot of our competition problems, because it allows people to to do the research and activity and development that they need to develop different types of race cars under the common rule book, and allow people to understand what those are without a lot of expense and decide whether or not they want to be involved. It's totally transparent. And one of the big things that I had as a rule writer for some 25 years was the fact that you get people together, you write a rule, everybody's sort of thinking within the same box, and something comes up that's outside that box. As far as I was concerned, well and good, we missed that. But as far as people were concerned from an owner's or manufacturing side, because that guy took a little bit different track than you did, then you had a big skirmish on him. And I think that's very detrimental to the sport. If you look at IndyCar racing in particular, there are milestones that I think we all remember. And they weren't as expensive as in their time as some of the things we're looking at today. You had the Miller front wheel drive car, very significant in any situation. You had the Roadster, you had the lay down Roadster. You had the European invasion with the rear engine cars. You had ground effects cars. All these things were things that were going to make the sport different, in some cases destroy the sport, but they were all things that drew fan interest to the sport. And you don't have that with a spec car. You totally lose that. Yeah. As a series administrator, I didn't see a lot of my new cars until the Indy 500, because that's what people wanted to showcase what they were doing. And that was not the series that I was running. That was a separate situation. But that's how significant new car activity was.
And Kirk, I just want to address one quick thing, and then I'll turn it back over to Gordon because I saw the 5-minute sign. But I think a mark for the success of the new car is going to be fan attendance. Because you just said, the look, the 3 engine manufacturers now coming into the series, all of that is new technology, it's exciting, it's something different, and I think a great predictor of the success of that is going to be to see fan interest going up.
Again, like I said, the things that Ben had considered in this thing was even the interactive web activity for fans, which puts racing back into the media that people are using. And we're really missing that today.
No, I agree with Kirk completely all the way down the line there. I think it's unfortunate we really haven't been able to have a discussion about the open source side of things. Again, Kirk's mentioned how much he's a champion of it, and I think this is an aspect of the Delta Wing that probably hasn't been taken on board by the vast majority of people. Essentially, I'm sure most of you are aware of it, but with an open source system, every new piece that you develop or build will be available there. So it will be available to everybody. So from Kirk's point of view, it's a way to get around all of this thing where skullduggery coming in from the outside. But it is a tremendous potential thing for racing. Racing needs to be, I think, should adopt it. Perhaps it should be an important component of next year's conference here for debate. Perhaps we get Ben Bowlby here to discuss that. And just in closing, I had the great pleasure in last month's issue of Motorsport to write about the Delta Wing. I'm a big believer, a big champion in the Delta Wing. Again, I come back to I was very, very disappointed when the Delta Wing was rejected, and I was shocked at how many of my colleagues in the press and many race fans, the antipathy that they had towards the Delta Wing. And I must say that I said to them, guys, I think you're lost in this spec car world and this spec car thinking. My basic point to them was, let's imagine it's 1955. You are a fan of Indy Roadsters. You are a fan of the Maserati 250F Formula One car, the Mercedes-Benz W196. And I said to you, we're going to replace these cars with these tiddly little rear-engine Coopers and Lotuses. And you would have said, you're a lunatic, man. But it happened overnight. We need more of that in racing. Thank you, gentlemen, ladies. It's been a pleasure.
Sorry to cut you off a little bit short, but we got started late. A couple of things here. Firstly, William Sahila, Kimberly have kindly left some copies of Race Tech magazine out on the table for compliment for people. If people want other copies, I'm told that if you go down to stand 635 downstairs, if you're quick enough, they might have some available extra ones down there, right, William? Okay. We have managed to keep this room for an evening double presentation in an hour's time, which gives people an hour to grab a bite to eat somewhere. That's why I kind of hurried you along. We were trying to think of a good title for this, but it's come up as a bench racing program. Gordon is going to return and talk about
how Mario and Birdie interviewed his race car.
Basically, yes, okay. And then Pete Helton is going to talk about some of the things that he learned in researching his book on